Hey, highly recommenders, we're here again for another highly recommended Jiu-Jitsu edition. Today, we of course have world-renowned, legendary Professor Robert Drysdale here, luckily enough, at his home in Las Vegas. I do appreciate you taking the time, especially to have me over here at your homestead doing this interview. I'm sure you are busy and probably don't even want to be doing this more hanging out with your family, but hey, I do appreciate this.
No, absolutely not. Thank you for having me. Sorry for this has been long in the making. You know, it didn't happen before. You know, just been busy, but yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. As some of you might not know, but we did try to get in contact with them last year, but hey, you know what? Schedules are, schedules is. So we finally got it to happen this time around. I mean, heck, we got Professor Robert Drysdale to take time out of his day to do an interview. So let's actually kick it off right to the start. I know you are a legend in this industry, in this sport, especially for American Jiu-Jitsu. So if you don't mind me asking the first question, what got you into Jiu-Jitsu? What got you started training Jiu-Jitsu?
Let me see. I guess, you know, when you're a teenager, you're trying to prove yourself, and I always had that a desire to prove myself. I was never really good at anything as a child. I tried everything and I sucked at everything. True story. I was below mediocre at everything I did. I was never good at anything, you know, but I always felt the need that I wanted to be good at something. I just hadn't found the right thing, and once I found jiu-jitsu, it was all in. There was no hesitation. I just this is it. So it was I was 100% committed from day one.
100%. And now, when was day one? Well, you look like a young guy, so 80s, 70s?
No, I was 1998 was my first, March 3rd, 1998 was officially my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Professor. I'm going with the 80s, 70s, and you say 90s.
I wasn't even born in the 70s.
Oh my gosh, I do apologize, Professor.
It's okay.
Oh my.
It makes me feel older than I am, but I don't mind.
No, so it was, you said 98?
98, yeah.
Nice. And where was that? Where was that first class? And who was it with?
It was a small city outside of São Paulo in Brazil called Itu, in an academy called Quatro Tempos. And the teacher was a guy called Alexandre Mansur, who was a purple belt under Otávio de Almeida Jr. was his nephew, actually. He was a purple belt teaching the morning class. That's when I trained.
Okay.
So it was a purple belt. Actually, it was a blue belt. No, it was a purple belt for a few days, and then right after, it was a blue belt who took over called Sergio, and he was my teacher for a little minute. And then after that, I can't remember what I think I changed my schedule so I could train at night, and I started training in the evening with Otávio de Almeida Jr., and that was when I was a white belt. And then I moved to Las Vegas as a white belt in end of 98.
Okay. And so you literally came to America as a fresh white belt, only knowing the basics. And then what made you want to continue that? Because going from Brazil to America, I'm sure that had to have been a big transition for yourself.
Well, I didn't come here for jiu-jitsu. I came here because I finished high school in Brazil, and the plan was always to finish high school in Brazil and then attend college in the United States. And I was sticking to the plan. I just like jiu-jitsu more than I like going to school, you know. And I like going to school, but I just really like jiu-jitsu. So even though I was going to community college when I was here, I was accumulating some credits here and there, my focus was primarily on jiu-jitsu. And at that time, we're talking like 99 and 2000 here, right? There were very few competitions in the United States, very few. There was the Joe Moreira Invitational, Copa Pacifica, organized by Kleber Luciano. There were judo tournaments. We would enter judo tournaments, but that was it. There were basically 2 tournaments on the West Coast a year. That was it.
And so that circle must have had to have been really small. You had to know pretty much everyone that was showing up.
Everyone. If you saw someone back in 99, 2000, if you saw someone wearing a Tapel t-shirt, you can straight up walk up to them, or any fighting t-shirt. It wasn't like boxing, obviously. You could walk up to that person and say, "Where do you train?" And you're immediate friends with that person because there was no one training.
Okay.
Then. You know, it was very rare that you found someone that knew what the UFC was or knew what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was. But it was an exciting moment too because we knew we were onto something. It was very obvious. We knew. It was just a matter of time that the questions were. Those are the two questions that everyone asked. I remember. When is MMA, which was still called Vale Tudo, which is its correct name technically, or No Holds Barred, which is like the Americanized version. They later changed for MMA, but the correct name is Vale Tudo. And when is Vale Tudo going to surpass boxing? That was the question. The second question they asked was, when are Americans going to surpass Brazilians in jiu-jitsu? It was another very common question. It was an expectation, right? It was just a matter of time. And it was an exciting time to be part of the sport because it was so young, and we were still trying to figure out how to grow and which way it was going to grow, and it was, the excitement, the Mecca was still Brazil. There were no major tournaments except the Pan Ams, which were in Florida back in the day. Yeah. The big change was in 2007 when IBJJF moved their headquarters to the United States, to Southern California. That was the big change, and then from then onwards, it's more like modern jiu-jitsu history. It's less controversial. But before that, it's a very interesting stage because there was no money to be made. There was no popularity. There was no YouTube. There was no social media. So it was a very different jiu-jitsu environment.
Well, now, so that's going to bring into one of my next questions is, you've got to see the evolution of jiu-jitsu, especially here in America, from the 90s all the way to what it is now. And some would say that even now, here in 2022, that jiu-jitsu is just now, in the past 3 years, maybe since 2018, we'll go 4 years, is just now actually fully exploding on both West and East Coast of the United States, and even in the Midwest with Daisy Fresh. You got Daisy Fresh making a name for themselves. So what is your take on that evolution? Do you think Americans have surpassed Brazilians in jiu-jitsu yet, or do you think that is still coming?
I think it's blown up in the United States primarily it's important to recognize the reasons why jiu-jitsu has blown up in the United States. A lot of people don't realize this. The first force behind the growth of jiu-jitsu around the world, not just the United States, but the world, is IBJJF. They gave structure to the sport. They had none in Brazil, right? They came in almost too late into the sport. But when they come, they give it structure. They give it rules. They give it an air of professionalism. They give it you go to an IBJJF tournament, it almost looks like you're part of the Olympics. It's super organized. It's on time. It's about the only jiu-jitsu organization that starts everything on time. They have systems. They have order. And they have made jiu-jitsu more respectable because of their systems. The second force is Joe Rogan. People underestimate how important Joe Rogan is to this whole conversation because he just doesn't shut up about jiu-jitsu, right? And that helps us. Every week someone signs up in my gym because of Joe Rogan, so he has been very, very instrumental because he became, with the growth of MMA, because he grew alongside the UFC, right? That was he had that fear factor, but his real platform was the UFC. As it grew, he grew, and then his podcast kind of piggybacked off that moment there, and he has a huge microphone now. One of the biggest, if not the biggest microphone in the world. And he just talks about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu nonstop. So that's been very, very helpful. So that right there helped Jiu-Jitsu grow around the world. But to answer your question, whether Americans have surpassed Brazilians, first of all, I don't think it's an important question. I think I never like and I'm not trying to shit on your question. It's a question everyone asks. And if they're not asking, they're thinking it. Yeah. It's just, I think that I call it pseudo-nationalism. I think patriotism is something else, right? It has nothing to do with I'm going to put an A in front of jiu-jitsu and that makes me a patriot. No, not really. But I've never liked this sort of rivalry between you. It's always silly to me. I never liked it. Maybe because I'm half American, half Brazilian. I never saw it as something productive. I don't think it's important. I think it's destructive, in fact. I remember during that last ADCC, this is my favorite moment of the last ADCC. You ready? This has nothing to do with fighting. Nothing to do with technique. The technique was superb. Great matches, all that, right? My favorite moment, there's some corners of the arena, maybe 10% of it, not even. They were chanting USA, which they do in every game, but it had never been done in jiu-jitsu. That was the first time. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 25 years. It is the first time I saw someone chant that in a jiu-jitsu tournament. It had never happened before. They do it in other sports events, right? And the crowd wasn't going with it. And it was a moment there where Fabricio Verdun and Braulio Steve, I remember they got up and they started organizing the Mexican wave.
Yeah.
You know, and they started organizing, and the crowd jumped in right away. And that was kind of like shutting down the USA thing, because it was telling I think the people that are trying to advocate something called American Jiu-Jitsu is telling them, like, hey man, you're not the majority, and what we really want is not American or even Brazilian for that matter. What we want is unity. And the wave, I think, kind of symbolized that unity. Like, we want to be one, we're one. That's what the wave is, right?
Cool.
It's a way of celebrating the sport. Even if you're on opposing teams, you still celebrate the sport you love. And it was my favorite moment because it spoke exactly to this kind of thing, this idea that Brazil is going to surpass, U.S. is going to surpass Brazil, or it has to, I just don't think it's relevant. But if you're really at the bottom of the question, I think in terms of no-gi, it's close, but I think Brazil is still ahead. And I think in terms of gi, Brazil is still far ahead. But I don't think it's, it's something you can measure. It's not either, you can just go online, pull up results, do the math. It's not complicated, right? You can factually verify these things. But I just don't think that the fact that people are thinking that is something productive for jiu-jitsu, this sort of rivalry between U.S. and Brazil, or AJJ and BJJ, I don't think people realize how destructive it is.
No. So I'm one of those people that just calls it jiu-jitsu. That's it. And I don't really say BJJ or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu often. I do give credit to the people that I learned from, Professor Hobson, who is my current instructor and has been for the past few years. I wouldn't be to the skill level I am without his knowledge and his professor either who taught him, and so on and so forth. And then as it spreads, and when I come over here to cross-train or anything like that, I know some schools, I don't hear it as often as I did when I first got into training, but I used to hear a lot, what are you doing? Don't go to other schools. Upson's never been like that to me, but I know other schools that are like that to their students, and they don't like their students to cross-train. But I've been one of those people that you can learn a lot from people that you don't know.
Yeah.
And what is your take on that? Because you're an instructor as well. You run a school. Do you allow your students to? Do you welcome other students in, as well as vice versa? Allow your students to go, or is that even not a thing to you?
No, my school has what we call an open door policy. You're welcome to walk in and you're welcome to leave. No one's obliged, no one's obligated to stay. No one, everyone's welcome. Anyone who has ever been to my school will tell you the same thing. It has a very welcoming environment. No, there's nothing threatening or harassing about anyone, no menacing about any of the members. I make sure that the culture is very healthy and good in that way.
Okay.
That's the hardest thing about being a gym owner, is keeping that culture healthy. And we've always done that. That's why we always have like new guys coming. Even like, doesn't matter what happens, like the gym's always on its feet, But to answer your question about cross-training, man, like I've been on both sides of that fence, and I think it's a complicated issue because, look, if you're a practitioner, jiu-jitsu is just fun, and you just want to have a blast, and you just want to see or train with your friends who live across town, you want to get together once a week. From your perspective, it's completely innocent. But there are two things here that you're not seeing. One of them is the less idealistic, less noble, perhaps, the financial interest of the gym owner. So the gym owner does not want to lose you to a different gym. So he's thinking about his finances, which seems selfish, but at the same time, jiu-jitsu is not that profitable. A lot of people are struggling out there, and losing a student is significant to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So they protect their business, and you are their business. That's the reality of the conversation. So they're very protective of it. They don't want you going elsewhere. There's another thing that goes on here, is that a lot of schools use what I call an open door policy to their advantage, namely that they will have us open mats at their school and invite your students over, right? But they'll never let their students come to your gym. Well, that's not a very good deal, is it? So I've had this. At some point, I had a guy who had a gym across town, and he trained at my gym before he opened his own place, but he would still come to my gym every now and then. And at one point, he was handing out T-shirts of his new school inside my school.
Wow.
Inviting my guys to go over there, sign
you
up.
were there?
Oh yeah. And then when I put a stop to it, he had the nerve to call me, "You changed your political all of a sudden."
What?
And then some of it borders on insanity. But I've seen it all. But that's the kind of thing you're dealing with. So from a business owner perspective, like there's two sides to that. And I've been on your side of the fence too. I just want to train with my friends, right? But there's another point of this story that no one ever talks about, is that we have to acknowledge that the vast majority of jiu-jitsu practitioners are recreational practitioners, right? They're not professional athletes. I get it. If you're somewhat of a professional, or you intend to be a professional, or you want to be a world champion, you want to be a 1%er, right? That's your goal in jiu-jitsu. It's very important you understand this. If you want to be that guy, you should not be cross-training at all. It makes no sense. It is against your own interest to cross-train. For the same reasons, if you were a football player for the Raiders, you wouldn't cross-train with the Patriots, would you? For a matter of professionalism. No other sport does that. Only in jiu-jitsu, because we are such a tightly knit community of friendships that sometimes we forget that we're actually opponents out there. Now, if you're a recreational practitioner and you don't care about winning the world title, it doesn't matter. If you're a professional or aspiring to be a professional jiu-jitsu, it's mind-boggling that you would want to train with the opposition to me. First of all, they don't care about your health. If they injure, they don't give a shit. They're not your friends. Maybe one of them might be, but the other one isn't. You don't know. You're going to get challenged in a way there where it's not going to be amicable. Okay, the risk of injury is a lot higher. Trust me, they're picking you apart. They may be friendly. They may smile at you. They'll be nice to you, but they are picking your game apart, and you're like this, taking notes, mental notes on how to defeat you in the next tournament. And this is all in disguise of like, oh, it's all buddy, friendship. Guys, most of it, reality, has less to do with jiu-jitsu. It has more to do with what I call high school behavior. Okay. I want to hang out with the cool kids. I want to find out where I sit in the pecking order, because you see so-and-so and you just want to be on the mats with them because you just want to develop those friendships, like expand your network, right? So it's more socializing than it is training. And I've seen a lot of these open mats where people cross-train. I've seen them. It's like 90% socializing, 10% training. You get harder training at your own. I mean, at my gym, at least, I know my guys are getting harder trained than they are when they cross-train, right? So between socializing, the risk of injury, and your opponents like picking you apart because they're taking notes of everything, of every injury you have, of everything you're doing, everything you're not doing, I just don't see the advantage if you are aspiring to be a professional. I think it's to your detriment. And the gym as well. Because what's the incentive I have as a coach to train you when you're helping other people instead of helping your own teammates? Now, if you're lacking training partners, there are exceptions that can't be made. That happened to me. I was to the point when I won the world as a purple belt in Brazil. Like, the gym I was going to, everyone had either moved, gotten injured, or wasn't training. I was basically training with white belts. I was a brown belt who had just won a world title as a purple, and I was training with white belts every day.
Wow.
So at some point I had to leave, but it was amicable. You understand? Yeah. Like, it's not, like, it was one thing that we talked about. It's like, it's not a choice. Like, I'm either going to, swim or sink here. Exactly. Yeah. But I think the vast majority of overtraining, cross-training or open mat that people are asking for has very little to do with jiu-jitsu, has very little to do with exposing yourself to different sort of resistance. It is more to do with socializing and more to do with, I think from the business owner's perspective, the one that's inviting, I think it's a lot of business too. Yeah, come to my gym, because they want to feel welcome, because they know that when you have a fallout with your instructor, which happens all the time in jiu-jitsu, you already have roots in that particular gym. So it's a business strategy. And I find it very dishonest, because to me, cross-training would mean that one week you come to my gym, the next week I go to yours. That I can kind of see working. But when it's a one-way street, well, it's not cross-training, that's poaching students. Of course, a student doesn't see it that way, but that's exactly what the gym owner is seeing.
That's a good way to put things, and open my eyes to a perspective that I didn't think about as a student, as prior to wanting to operate a school in the future. That is my end goal. This is what I have turned into a career. However, I'm not a competitor in any way. I do compete once in a while. I feel like if I'm gonna open a school, but I do want to open up a school in the future. And I feel like if I'm gonna operate a school, be a teacher, then I do need to compete. I do need to show some level of variation of skill level to those that I will end up teaching in the future. Before I ask my next question, well, I guess this is a question in itself. What's your take on that? Do you think instructors should have done the competition circuit at one point in life, or should be competing, or do you think that it's okay? Have you ever met instructors that haven't competed that turned out to be very good instructors?
Some of the best coaches were not great fighters. This is in boxing, MMA, and because coaching in reality, here, as a fighter and a coach, I've seen it from both perspectives, right? I have a hard time trusting someone who's never done it, to be honest with you. When someone has seen it and done it from the sidelines, really just watching, and hasn't broken their body on the mat, like if you're a coach and you have no injuries, to me that's suspicious. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I respect the guy that can barely walk. Like, that's the kind of guy that, okay, that's the guy that I'm more likely to trust. With that being said, you know, maybe I see things differently. To me, like, coaching has always been about technique and instruction. But the truth is, a coach is a lot more than that. You know, and maybe because I've never really had that. Maybe sometimes I did, but not for short periods of time I had that. But a coach is really like a father figure. So it's more of an emotional thing than a technical thing. This is why a lot of the guys who are seen as really good coaches, if you dig this deep, they have very little experience. And they're seen as like some of the best coaches out there, but they have very little experience, close to none. And some of them have a lot, but like a lot of them have very little experience. But they're very good psychologists, right? They're very good. They play the role of a father figure very well. Because when you're fighting is extremely emotional, very emotional. Fighters are not willing to admit this because you're supposed to be tough, supposed to be manly.
So you left off at
coaches are like father figures, right?
Yeah.
So what is called good coaching is really, a lot of it is just psychology. Like, you have to be that strong figure who gives your fighter or your student confidence because they're looking for it. They can barely hold on. They have very little confidence. They have very little belief in them. They have doubt. All fighters do, even if they don't show it. You self-doubt. Coach is the guy that comes along and is supposed to fortify whatever confidence you have. And if you have none, to give you a little bit to build from that, right? So you can be an amazing technician and not be able to do that. And then you can be the guy who's really good at giving confidence and not know shit about jiu-jitsu or fighting in general, right? And ideally you would have both, right? I think that if between the two, the father figure / psychologist is the more important one. I think that's more important than technique.
Okay.
Because I've seen both, and I've seen, maybe it's not even for the better, but it's what most people will prefer to lean towards. Even if the guy's deceitful, even if he's a fraud. I'll give you an example. Because if you speak with confidence, you ever seen a con artist?
Yeah.
How do they speak?
Like they know everything, but they don't
look you in
shit.
the eye, they tell you what you want to hear, they speak with confidence, and it's almost like a placebo effect. It's just like a bunch of like hot air, but it works. It has like a placebo-like effect because you assimilate it. You, like, if the guy, I've seen guys that don't know a thing about boxing hold pads and speak about with confidence about it, and I know that, man, that's not going to work in a fight. But they're so confident about it, the fighter, this is my guy, and they're going to try it in a fight, which is kind of dangerous too because the guy doesn't have the experience. On the other hand, you can have a guy, the more knowledge you have, you ever hear that, like, all I know is that I nothing know? It's sort of like how jiu-jitsu is, right? Like, the more you learn about jiu-jitsu, the more you learn about fighting, the less you know. So if you have any hesitation when you speak, and I've seen that as well, even if the more knowledgeable you are, the more hesitation you have, because the more you realize, shit, there are way too many variables here, right? So it almost has like an opposing correlation. The more knowledgeable the guy is, the more insecure he is about what he says. The more confident someone is about something, chances are they know very little about what they're talking about. So between those two, it's very rare that someone has both those qualities. Normally you're going to have one or the other. I've been always more like, I understand fighting better than most, but I never, when people ask me questions, I'm very rarely able to answer with confidence on like certain, like some topics it's easy to answer, but other ones it's hard because you see the variables. So you go, depends. And that's not the shit a fighter wants to hear the day before the fight. He doesn't want to hear depends. But the truth is what?
It all depends.
It depends.
You
right?
never
But
know.
that's not, so this is like sometimes like the con artist type does better because he doesn't even see option 18, 19, and 20. He only sees, he's so ignorant. He knows so little that he only knows one option. And then when you only see one option, you don't see all the other colors in the rainbow. What is it that you go for? You speak with, that's it, clearly. That's all. So it's almost like being not being knowledgeable is almost an advantage in some ways because it gives you that sort of ignorant confidence.
I like that perspective on that. Yeah. So I see that all the time, which is probably why the growth in McDojos has been so prominent. I'm glad that social media has been putting them on blast and everything, but it's just I'm one of those, as a student, I am one of those people who seek that like tough, not that firm teaching, but that like tough love kind of teaching. It's like,
that's what everyone. That's the real love.
Hey,
everyone does.
I'm gonna bring you in.
Yeah.
I'm gonna teach you what I know. But hey, man, you fuck up. I'm gonna show you why, and I'm gonna.
That's what a good teacher does.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like that, there's a conflict about this, and we're experiencing it right now, because this is deep down. That's what people want. I truly believe that. It's the tough love. The teacher that marked you, or the person that marked you the most, was the one that taught you what? The tough lessons.
Correct.
The easy route of, pity and like, oh, poor you, little Johnny, you lost again. Here's a medal. You don't remember that coach, do you?
Mm-mm.
Which coach do you remember?
The one that
yelled at you.
Me. Yep.
Get your ass back on the mat. Stop being a little bitch. Stop
Pull
crying.
Him back. Pull him back.
Fight. Like wipe those tears off your face and go get back in there and fight, right? That's the guy that we remember.
Correct.
But we're living in a world that condemns this kind of coach that we're talking about and glorifies the one that goes, oh, here's a medal because you lost.
Yeah.
So the culture has changed so dramatically, right? And because your clients, your students are the ones paying, they kind of get to shape the culture more than you do in reality because you got to pay rent.
Yeah.
So in reality, they're the ones shaping culture, in the gym. I mean, I'd like to. I do my best to try to like fight that, but people on the surface, they want one thing, right? But deep down, they really want something else, right? And on the surface, they want belt. On the surface, they want candy. On the surface, they want the reward. They want the easy. They want the comforting. They want the but the deep down, man, like I don't believe. I think deep on a very primal, very inner level, like something borderline spiritual, I think what people want is they want things that are hard. They don't want easy things because easy things are not valuable. And we're living in a world that glorifies easy, and it's a problem. And it's very difficult to teach because of it.
And knowledge comes from the heart.
Comes from hard places.
Yeah. So with this mindset, and the progression throughout the years of jiu-jitsu, especially here in America. So you went as a student to now an instructor. You are a legend in the sport. What is some of the difficulties that you could think of clear as day during your growth from a student to now an instructor, a well-known instructor on top of it? For anyone that is coming up, that might end up becoming a well-known, famous instructor that people seek out. Has there been any issues, any struggles that you have faced that if you had known how to handle it back then, such as when you opened up your school or anything like that, is there anything that you could think of that you wish you had known then that you know now? Oh my God.
A lot. A lot, but again, if you start thinking that way, you start resenting who you are. And I don't want to do that, You can always look back and go, oh, I would have done things different. My MMA career ended because I failed a drug test in the UFC, right? And I've asked myself that question a million times. What would have happened had I not failed that drug test? What had happened had I lived my dream of being a UFC champion, for example, right?
Yeah.
And I go, I have no idea what that life would have been like. What would that life like? I don't know.
No.
You want to think it's better. And I think financially it would have been better, but that's not the only value in life. That is a value in life, but it's not the only one you carry along. Even if you say you do, we carry a number of values in life, right? Money is just one of them. So I go, what would I be? I don't know. But then I look who I am today and what I've been through and what I know and what I have and who I am. And I go, oh, I like the person I am. So because I don't know who that guy would be, and I know exactly who I am now, well, maybe not exactly, but I'm in the process of finding out, right? You're always learning to discover yourself. then I'd much rather be who I am now, because I don't know what that guy is, right? So you shouldn't regret. But my point is, like, you should never regret. Like, you should always you can learn from your mistakes, but you shouldn't regret your past because it got it where you are.
Now, was there anything that you had to learn running a business and opening up a school? Like, when I opened up my business, the first thing and the hardest thing that I had to learn came back to bite me in the butt, is differentiating my money between my personal money and my business expense money.
Yeah.
I thought, hey, my lunches, tax write-off. That's fine. No, Joseph, that's not a tax write-off at all. Oh, no? No, you owe this money.
And here's the thing, when you have like a small operation, this is what scaling is, right? And I learned this lesson the hard way too. When you have a small operation, let's say you have 20 students, you remember everyone's names. You remember when to stripe them, because you remember when all the 20 students were striped last. You remember when they're due a belt. You remember what their injuries are. You remember everything, right? And then the more students you have, the harder it is to remember. So you need systems to keep track of all that. And it's the same with your money, right? If your money, when you have little money and you're starting your business, right? You're not rich, right? You have like 20 students, or you have like whatever, let's say your business is pulling in 100 grand a year, for example. Just like, that's not a lot for business. But what I'm saying is, what that does is it's easy to keep track of your finances, right?
Yeah.
And then you start scaling, right? What happens is, now where's that money going? Now that's when you start separating this business from that business. Your expenses, your money for your budget for marketing, your budget for this, your budget for, saving, just like for a rainy day. Like, and it's so much trickier to manage it, right? Not that I'm rich, but like I could see that already being a problem. So that was a lesson, like learning how to separate my personal and financial life, which I think I do a pretty good job these days. But the other one was, I think I severely misunderstood how people are, and I deceived myself into believing that people were how I wanted them to be, and I think I still make these mistakes. I still make them, and I think a lot of people do. I think that people that walk in life knowing exactly what people are and what world is like, they fare better, at least in financial terms, if not in social, political ones as well, because they're walking into a fight with the appropriate weapons. When you have a misconception of human nature, you walk into life with your hands down.
All right, highly recommenders, as we end this up, big thanks to the sponsors, Adderhold Roofing and Construction. If you need a new roof, check them out. And if you need your music needs, if you need a DJ, then reach out to DJ Stickum. Thanks, guys, for the sponsorships and everything. Stay tuned for. All right, so I understand with the hardships of starting a gym and not really realizing the type of people or the expectations of new students and teaching people. Everyone is a different book in a sense. But with that being said, I just want your honest, blunt opinion, if you don't mind telling me, Professor. But what's your take between old school practitioner and instructors versus nowadays practitioners, instructors? I commonly see this old joke that it was much tougher back then than what it is now. Is that true in any way, shape, or form? Or is this just all hogwash?
There's been a change. There's been a shift, but it's not. I don't think it's jiu-jitsu per se. I think it's the world.
Okay.
I think it's a much bigger cultural problem. Like I remember my mother's father, my grandfather, right? He grew up in poverty, cornfield. He started working when he was 8 years old, right? He never had a toy when he was a kid. He didn't have his first toy was a little, like tiny little ball when he was like a teenager. Like he never had a toy. He never had Christmas. He never had a birthday, right? So he worked from 8 till 77, whenever 80 something, whenever he died. I can't remember now, right? He worked his entire life. Never traveled, never had any leisure, no pleasure, no toys, just like work, right?
Work.
Yeah, that's all he did, right? And he's the strongest human I've ever met, Like that guy would have, like, I mean, we would have all broken before that guy broke. He just wasn't going to break, you know. And
Provided for the family.
Everything. He do what he would have to do to provide for his family, right? And he thought I was a weakling.
Huh?
He saw me.
You?
Oh yeah. He thought I was like the biggest pussy in the world. He gave me shit my whole life. In fact, he's like, you know, he never said it like that, but I knew that he felt I was a weakling because I had toys, I had a normal childhood, and I went to school, and to him it was like, oh, that's how it's you know, exactly. But but when I compare myself to this younger generation, I feel like I'm tough.
Yeah.
You know, because it's gotten softer, and it's not just jiu-jitsu. It's everyone's gotten softer to the point where not even, I mean, even humor is being eliminated. You can no longer make fun of people.
No.
Why not? Why can't you, like, they're literally going after, like, comedians like Dave Chappelle, Joe Rogan. You can't even make fun of people anymore. Like, what happened?
That saying, sticks and stones hurt my bones, but words will never hurt,
Yeah.
had gone out the window. And it
needs
so
to come back.
annoying.
It needs to come
It
back.
needs to come back.
It is awful, man.
It's like, it's driving me nuts.
You know, in jiu-jitsu the other day, like, I yelled at a student because he's like, I'm talking to a student and he's off the mats wandering around. I'm trying to get him to come back. It's like, you know, I give him a scolding. And he was shocked at things like basically.
How dare you yell at me,
it's because
interrupting.
this is a generation that has never been chastised. They've never been told they're wrong. They've never been yelled at. They've never been put under pressure. Like the American schooling system, right, has brought them up, get them to believe that they're entitled, but there's no other way to put it, right?
Yeah.
And it's gotten worse. And it permeates jiu-jitsu. So it's not just, rather, you see it in the gym. So that's the difference. But to be fair, in technical terms, younger generations are much, much better. You can't even compare.
Okay.
But that's not their credit. That's the credit of everyone who precedes them. That's what people don't realize.
Yeah.
Like a
That's
current
'cause there was
generation,
before.
when they're doing something, you're just getting the digested product. You didn't do all the trial and error of thousands of attempts that precedes that refined technique. You're getting it on YouTube, my friend.
Yeah.
There are people that actually had to trial and error that until you perfected it. So the real heroes to me are the people that started doing this in the 1950s, right? I think we should give them credit, man.
Good. I fully agree with that. That's why I always pay respects to those who taught me, and as well as whenever I see my professor's professor, only met him one time, but still it was, hey,
Andre?
hey professor, huh?
Andre Pedernales?
Cal, his like, when he was a teenager.
Okay, I don't think I met him. No,
Yeah.
no.
But yeah, I met him when he awarded Hobson his 6th degree or something like
Hobson is a true legend, man. You don't ever call me a legend in the presence of Hobson, man. Like Hobson is the real deal.
that. Yeah. First time I met him, I was that was the first time I actually studied over my words, and everyone laughed over me.
He
but
did
it was
not get
just
the recognition he deserves, in my opinion.
No?
No.
This is the
He
first
deserves
time
more.
I've
No,
ever heard this.
No. I'll give you a list of guys that never deserve the recognition, never got the recognition they deserve.
Wow.
Hobson is one of them.
Yeah,
The
just
one
give me
that
a
got the
handful.
least recognition, in my opinion, that might be pound for pound the best or top 3, if not the best grappler of all time, is Bruno Malfacini. Never got
Professor
because
Malfacini.
what he did to me is more impressive than what Buchecha did, or Roger. Because Buchecha went on to win 13 world titles, I believe. But you got to remember, Buchecha competed in 2 divisions.
Yeah.
Bruno Malfacini won 12, I believe, in 1 division. That's more impressive because he's competing in only 1 division. So he is the number 1 in the world for 12 years straight, or however number of titles he has. I think it's 12.
Yeah.
I think he's just behind Buchecha. But Buchecha competes in 2 divisions. So I think guys like that are very underrated. This is why I see, like, you know, and I get the reputation for being a hater, man. And it's like, I think it's the other way around. I think I'm loving.
Yeah,
The other
I think
people are
you're
the ones
just
hating.
acknowledging those who are unacknowledged.
You got to be fair. You got to be fair. You know, and what the press does is they pick and choose their favorites, and they pump them and they make them like superstars, and they're like purple belts. And I'm like, guys, you guys never they gave that recognition to people that have like 6, 7 world titles at the black belt level, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with, like, you know, the audience is an English-speaking audience. The people who spend money speak English. They don't speak Portuguese. So there's a bias there that has to do with where the money's coming from. And I understand that to a degree. But I guess my view of you know, journalism in general is just, maybe it's idealistic, but you report the facts as they are. It's not a business. I mean, there's a business side to journalism, I get it. But you're supposed to report it as almost
As
like a
is.
historian, accurately.
Yeah.
Not like, not picking and choosing data and picking their favorites. And they have all these metrics that they've come up with recently that never existed, but the metrics are tailor-made to specific people. It's very interesting how they pick and choose
So-
the metrics that they want to use.
I'll freak you out real quick, and it's to sidetrack on the whole thing, but a year ago I went for a job interview, and it was for a company that literally manipulated voting districts.
Yeah.
So they create Facebook pages, get hundreds of thousands of people to follow it within a certain county or whatever.
Yeah.
They break it up and they just flood them with ads, and then they sell those to the targeted politicians.
Yeah.
And I thought this was all conspiracy made up.
No.
And I went for a job interview and they pulled me in.
That's exactly what they do.
And that's exactly what they did. And I'm like, oh, you're just
It's a weapon.
manipulating
At this
all
point,
this.
social media has become a weapon.
Yeah.
Manipulating public opinion is, I'm gonna get political, but if you're China or Russia, how do you hurt the United States? Can't do it with guns. How do you attack the American people?
Manipulation. through data.
Manipulation, right? Like that's, and I think there's a lot of that going on. I don't know details, but I think that if you dig, that's what you're gonna find, because it's become a weapon this day and age.
Yeah. I fully agree with that one. But not to get into too into that or onto a political side of anything. I did want to ask you before you got out of here, because I don't want to hold you up too long. You got a book. You had a book come out, and I heard that you might have some documentaries in the works as well. Your book is Open Guard.
So the documentary's been in the making for 4 years now.
Okay.
We're way behind schedule. Not due to me, due to a combination of dishonesty and incompetence by other people, but it is what it is, I'll take my share of the blame for being naive, not for being incompetent or lazy or anything else. I'll be blamed for being naive, right? But in the meantime, I wrote a book about the production and the history of jiu-jitsu, which was really initially it was meant to be an article about the history of jiu-jitsu. Actually, the article about my memories of making a documentary. And, it was just one of those things. I was during the lockdown. So I was literally sitting right here, and I had nothing to do. So I started typing, right? And then 2,000 words, 5,000 words, 20,000 words. Next thing you know, I'm at 60,000 words, and I can keep going. I'm like, shit, man, I got a book here, and that was, I had an editor that helped me a lot, Scott Burr. Roberto Pedreira helped me a lot in terms of the historical side of things. He was a big help. But yeah, man, it was fun, man. Actually, we sold way more. I was expecting, this is one of those things, if I sell 200 copies, I'll be shocked, We sold 500 copies in the first 3 days.
Wow. Hey, congratulations.
Yeah, we did that. We were number one on Amazon for Brazilian history for a minute.
Wow.
And we were number 3 in martial arts. We were behind Art of War and Bruce Lee's biography.
Okay.
We were number 3 on Amazon in martial arts, which was to me was
a huge
shocking.
thing, though.
I couldn't even. I screenshotted the Brazilian history one for some dumb reason. I didn't screenshot the one we were number 3 in the martial arts category, but I think that's even more relevant, right? Because it's martial arts, so specific. Americans don't read many books on Brazilian history, so it's less meaningful, I guess. But it was a shock, man. It's still selling. It sells every month. It's one of the best things I've ever done. I get a little income every month. If I do nothing, it just comes in. It's great. Amazon, awesome. Thank you. But I'm writing another one. I'm working on a second one, completely unrelated to the history of jiu-jitsu. That's what I was doing when you rang the bell. That's what I was doing.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you mind telling the audience, do you have a name about the book, what it's about? Can you give any information about it?
So I'm rewriting it for the 3rd time now. Believe it or not, I still don't know what the book is about. I have an idea of what I want to say, but it's very broad.
Okay.
I might have to break it down into 2 books. But the main idea is exactly what we're talking about. At heart, humans are fighters.
Yeah.
We like to fight. We like challenges. We crave adversity. We say we want comfort. It's kind of like the coach thing we were talking about. We say we want the coach that gives us everything we want, right? But deep down, we want the coach that keeps us in line and pushes us to excel. We want the hard coach, right? So we want hard things. We want difficult things. Yet we live in a culture of weakness and you know, everyone's a victim and you know, pity me. Like I literally have to hear people that grew up in the richest country in history whine about how difficult their life is. I'm like, bro, you've never seen a ghetto. I know. I don't know. I don't want to be a dick, but you have no idea what poverty looks like. Americans have no idea what poverty looks like, and then people complain nonstop, and it's kind of like, it's, you know, and it goes back to that problem we're talking about, because it does make its way into jiu-jitsu, like the culture of victimization. It's starting to bother me, because it's the other day, man. I was actually writing about this in the book when you rang the bell. I had a 13-year-old kid step on the mats. He couldn't do laps on the mats without losing his balance. He's an overweight kid. He's like 13 years old, 200 pounds. But he couldn't run laps because I realized this kid has never ran before. It was the first time he was like actually, maybe the first, like I'm sure he ran when he was a toddler.
On the computer his whole life.
His computer his whole life, iPad. And the mom brings him in because she wants me to reverse 13 years of fucking up. And I'm supposed to fix it over $130 a month, you know, and I'm not even allowed to discipline her child, because if I do.
Professor Drysdale. 13 years of fucking this kid up. I gotta whip him into shape.
Now the parent's going to listen to this, I'm going to lose a student. But like, it's, and here's the conundrum you're in, because you want to be a good coach. So what do you want to do? You want to put this kid in line. But if you do that, what happens?
He's going to go to mom, dad.
And not only do I lose a student, it's going to spread in the community that I'm a tyrant. And some asshole's going to go and give me a Google review, and it's going to ruin my business. I got a mortgage to pay, so what do? I shut up, right? So it's like you're swimming upstream when you're trying to, because we have a conflict of values at heart, and that's what it comes down to. Values that my grandfather would have glorified, of strength, of pursuing like hard things and working hard and merit. We've flipped that on its head, and now we're living in a world of everyone's a victim. Poor me, you know, you can't say anything because they're going to cry. I need a safe space. Like, you need a safe space? Holy shit, man. Like, what have we come to? What is wrong with you? Yeah. What have we come to, you know? And it's slowly making its way into the culture where the way around it, I'm trying to bring like old school back. So what I do is I'm trying to make fun of my students again, because I like making fun of people, and I don't mind them making fun of me. I was bullied more than anyone else, you know. Think of an American kid growing up in Brazil. Imagine if I got bullied. And Brazilians don't even have a word for bullying, just to give you an idea, right? It doesn't exist. It's normal there.
All right. Do appreciate everything so far, Professor. And like I said, I don't want to hold you up too much longer, so to wrap this up, I do have a two-part question. First one, if you can answer it as short as possible, what is your idealistic way of passing an open guard? And second, what is highly recommended to Professor Drysdale?
So passing guard, there is a concept that I talk about a lot, and it's not a technique, it's more of a mindset. But it's the most important thing about passing. It has nothing to do with technique, because it doesn't matter what technique you use. There's a million techniques out there. They're all good, some better than others. But I think that the obsession with technique has gotten people a little off track with what's really important at the bottom, underneath the technique, right?
Okay.
When you're a passing guard, you're not going to pass with technique. You're using technique. What's going to get you to pass is your willingness to pass. Like, how much do you want to pass?
Your determination.
So I'll give you an example, because I used to pass like this, and I see some guys that pass that same way. Like, this is the kind of passing that I like to teach. You see the Ruotolo brothers when they're passing, for example. How do they pass? Wave after wave after wave. Forget the technique. The technique doesn't matter, because the technique is a secondary force here.
But they're relentless.
They're relentless, and that's the most important thing, because you always got to remember, when you're on top, your opponent is fighting gravity. So if it's hard on me on top, imagine how hard it is on person on bottom. So if I attack you wave after wave after wave after wave, and no matter how tired I am, every time I'm about to break and I'm going to take a break, you know what I tell myself? If I'm tired, imagine how tired this guy is. Yeah. So what do? And I know, and once they see me with that willingness to pass, you know what happens? Something happened. It's psychological. It's not technical. And this is why I'm saying that it's not all about technique. Because the technique is just like the makeup. That's on the surface. What's underneath it is there's a battle of the will.
Their mind breaks a little.
Who's going to break first, right? Because people are going to start breaking eventually. One of us is going to break, right? And it's not said, you know, but it's there. So one of them is going to break. So that's why what I tell people when they're passing is it's more about the mindset of not breaking first.
Okay.
And what was the second one?
There, you heard it. The mindset is is the most idealistic way of passing a guard, because the psychological mindset of your opponent as well as yourself, one of them might break. Hopefully it's your opponent, not you.
Oh, correction. It's always your opponent. There's no such thing as you're breaking. You got to eliminate. It starts with the language.
Okay.
Starts with the language. Maybe it's me. No. It's always him, right? And you start wording it like that because it slowly starts becoming part of your belief system. Make sense? Yeah, like it's hard thing to do. We have to like educate your language and your thoughts, so it's always you winning.
Thank you. And second question, which is the biggest one, what's highly recommended to Professor Drysdale? Could be anything: music, food, this coffee, your jiu-jitsu. What is highly recommended to you, sir? I know.
Do what you love. Learn how to surround yourself with the right ingredients for the recipe that makes you happy. Like, and don't be scared of saying no and hurting people's feelings and putting the hammer down. Like, focus on your happiness. You got to be selfish. Your happiness comes first.
Your happiness comes first.
Always.
Is highly recommended.
Always, always, always.
To Professor Drysdale.
Yep.
Professor, I do appreciate you taking the time for me.
Absolutely, brother. Anytime.